The countdown is almost complete. School is back in session this week. Most people returning tomorrow. We check in with parents and students to see how they're feeling ahead of the big day. A look outside in Windsor, Essex. Fog in the downtown this morning. Feels like 22 out there right now. 30 with the humidex. Colette Kennedy warned us about that, and she has all the details in her forecast later tonight. I'm Chris Ensing. Thanks for joining us. Essex Town Council has passed new policies that some hope will restore trust in the next municipal election. The town's mayor is facing a charge for allegedly procuring ineligible voters in the 2018 election through the proxy system. These new bylaws aim to address that and more. The CBC's Jason Vio joining us live here now. Jason, how will these new policies change the next election?
Well, Chris, last night, Council unanimously passed a bylaw that looks to more clearly spell out how election complaints will be handled in the future. Things like election signage or how candidates utilize their resources. And it comes with timelines attached to how quickly the clerk should respond to these types of concerns or complaints, and whether the town clerk is even responsible, depending on the type of complaint. And if they are not, handing it over to police or the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. Those things and those steps are clearly now spelled out in this new bylaw. And one councillor I spoke with says that this is just one piece of the puzzle in trying to restore some of the public's faith ahead of the next election.
It's like building a house without a solid foundation, and I feel like that's how this council is. We don't have that solid foundation built on trust and ethics, so we can't go backwards, but we can go forward, and we can make sure it's right for the next election. That is the foundation of democracy. That is our job, and if we can't do that, then we don't deserve to be on council.
Now, one concern that Bondi says she has in this new bylaw is that on advanced polling days and on election day, there are limited resources to enforce any complaints if they were to arise. So she wants to see more election staff on those days to kind of bolster their enforcement capabilities if they needed to be used.
Now, Jason, when it comes to the issues surrounding proxy voting, has anything changed there?
Yeah, so that happened about 6 weeks ago. Council passed a separate bylaw not related to what was passed last night, which specifically deals with the issue of proxy voting, which became clearly a big issue since the election in 2018. So under the new rules, candidates can no longer have stacks of those proxy forms that they would then give to people to fill out, and which would eventually fall under supporting them in the election. Instead, they'll now have to go through the town's clerk if they wish to use the proxy system.
I've read emails where people say they specifically don't trust the process. I can understand why they would feel that way. Personally, I believe that there's some confusion on proxies. As a council, we want people to understand that we want the procedures to be right. We want people to have faith that the person that's being elected is being elected through an honest campaign and the right number of votes.
Now, we know again that the mayor of Essex, Larry Snively, is facing a charge that was laid by the OPP back in February related to the alleged misuse of proxy voters in the 2018 municipal election here. That is still before the courts. I reached out to both Snively and his lawyer today, but my calls were not returned. Chris.
Thanks for this, Jason. Big night for a lot of families in Windsor, Essex. For many, it's the night before the first day of school, coming after months of teachers and parents raising concerns about the safety of students when school reopens. Now they're making last-minute preparations, from buying school supplies to getting classrooms ready. With more, I'm joined live by the CBC's Sanjay Maru. Sanjay, you spoke with some parents and students today. How are they feeling about tomorrow?
Well, Chris, they're excited but nervous. It's quiet here right now, but by this time tomorrow, thousands of students across the Windsor-Essex English school boards will have walked in and out of the first school day, the first day back to school for so many students in this region. We've been saying it for weeks now, a school year like no other. After about 3 in every 4 students opted for in-person learning, the rest electing for online learning. And here at CBC Windsor, we've been telling you about some of the changes, showing you some of those changes going on inside those schools. Things like distanced desks, a staggered start for students, and designated isolation rooms for students who are showing symptoms of COVID-19. However, the parents and students we spoke with, they say they're excited for back to school time, but they still have big concerns about the year ahead.
We're not sure, and everything's uncertain at the time, so we're not sure how this is all going to pan out. It's almost like a test, like a trial, unfortunately, but we're going to see how it goes in the next few weeks and hope for the best.
I feel like I'm going to be very diligent with washing my hands and wearing my mask and being aware of who's around me and what I'm touching. I just feel like sending everyone back to school, especially grade school kids, not all of them have to wear masks. I just feel like putting them in those classrooms could cause another flare-up.
I bought extra Ziplocs to get the masks with the clean and the dirty. That was the weirdest thing this morning, labeling them before I left for work, just making sure it's all ready for tomorrow. I think I'm as prepared as I can be. I've read a lot. The problem is everything changes every time I read it, so I'm not sure exactly what's happening 100% because you remember the old stuff, but I'm ready, I think.
I want them to go back in. They need to go back. I feel the children have to get back into school, but it's a little bit nervous about it at the same time.
I'm excited I kind of miss the math and all that.
Yeah.
And I like reading books too.
Missing math and backup masks. A lot of interesting concerns and comments from parents and kids there. But what about teachers? How are they feeling as they welcome students back tomorrow?
Well, Chris, I had a chance to speak with the local union president representing elementary teachers here in Windsor, Essex, and he says teachers are still nervous and anxious ahead of back to school time tomorrow, mainly because there's still a lot of unanswered questions, mainly around how ventilation will work in classes where they can't open windows, who exactly will be designated for each teacher, considering as of today, officials say class lists and timetables, well, they were still being updated, and questions around how mask enforcement will work. But the biggest concerns, Chris, surrounding these teachers, concerns with the COVID-19 outbreaks that we've seen in schools across the country, in other provinces, and the possibility of that being seen right here at home.
Is it going to happen? It's going to happen somewhere in the province of Ontario. It's a matter of when and being prepared. I think that locally we still are looking for more clarification on what the procedures will be. To be quite frank, we don't even know who the public health nurses are yet. That's something that the government announced back in August, and yet we don't even have them on staff yet. Like if a teacher needed to contact a public health nurse on the first day of school in terms of who's been assigned to their school, we don't know that yet.
And he adds there are, quote, ethical decisions that a lot of teachers will have to make when they get back in the classroom tomorrow, especially concerning those younger students who may have trouble putting on or taking off their mask. He says there might be times where if a student has trouble doing just that, they'll have to consider, do I go close to the student? Do I make contact with the student to help them with their mask, or do I keep that physical distancing guideline in place? So still a lot of information and, to be frank, confusion for a lot of teachers as students head back into school tomorrow. Chris.
Thanks, Sanjay. Walkerville Collegiate is known for its unique focus on the arts, but they've had to adjust how they put on plays.
Haven't really looked at the idea of indoor performances right now. It's not feasible. So instead what we're hoping for is outdoor performances with recorded music, possibly, maybe live music, but more likely for frogs anyway, looking at recorded music, and allowing the audience to bring their own chairs so they can distance themselves outdoors.
Now, so far, the planned performance of Frogs, the Greek comedy, was postponed from April to the fall. And as for music, instruments were cleared out so drama students could take over the space. Now, moving musicians into a larger area, which was downstairs.
We are looking into alternatives for being able to be outside and be able to practice, whether it be vocally and or dramatically and or even at some point maybe with our instruments.
Now, she says that they're looking at as many possible alternatives as they can so that teachers and students will be able to work to perfect their craft. Now, as students return to school shortly, it's left parents wondering what they should do to keep their children safe. The CBC's Sanjay Maru spoke with medical expert Dr. Peter Lynn to get some more answers.
Is there anything kids should avoid bringing into the house after school?
Yeah, so the two places where we find most virus and bacteria is on the floor, actually. So therefore, your shoes may be able to track these things in. So therefore, shoes should stay in the doorway when you get home. In other words, don't let them run around the whole house, because then you could track germs and things like that around your house. And the bottom of the backpack, unfortunately, that sits on the floor sometimes and picks up all these germs. So leave that down on the floor. So we don't want to see backpacks on top of tables or on top of beds, because now you've raised the virus from the floor up to an area where your hands may touch them, or you may lay down and now all of a sudden you're breathing some of those viruses in there as well.
What should I do if my child refuses to wear their mask?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Number one, you have to explain why the mask is important. And initially, we were telling people it protects other people. And I think a lot of parents said, but my child doesn't have any viruses. And I think kids sort of figured that out. I'm not sick, so why am I wearing this mask? So what the masks do is they stop the wind power. So therefore, I cannot move the virus out as far. So instead of being able to breathe it out 2 or 3 feet towards you, and then you could breathe it in, the mask will now make it only maybe 2 or 3 inches out.
You can study up with more of those suggestions and that full video on our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. The cluster of cases that came from a group gathering in August, it's grown. Last week, there was 31 COVID-19 cases from the spread, and now it's at 37.
The key message is there's a reason that why there are some restrictions, why some of these public health measures are in place, and to see that spread in such a way, it's a clear indication of why we are recommending some of these measures that we recommend. And when we're talking about these gathering, whether we're talking about indoor gathering, whether we are talking about outdoor gathering, why it is important to still follow all those public health measures.
The health unit is adding a few more places to their list for potential exposures, both on September 4th. The Chicharo Club and Shoppers Drug Mart on Dougal Avenue by Cabana Road West. Now, these are considered low risk, but anyone in those locations are asked to monitor themselves for symptoms. A new study shows that nearly half of Ontario's COVID-19 cases are immigrants and refugees, but they only represent a quarter of the population. The study looked at COVID-19 cases between January and June. I spoke with one of the authors of the study, a researcher, earlier this afternoon to get a sense of what's happening here in Windsor, Essex.
Even though immigrants and newcomers to Ontario make up only 25% of Ontario's population, we did find that they accounted for about 44% of positive tests. And this indicated to us that immigrants and newcomers were being disproportionately affected by COVID. In a deeper dive, we did look at particular subgroups of immigrants, and those groups, specifically refugees, as well as immigrants and refugees living in lower income neighborhoods. We did find that they appear to have barriers to accessing testing. And we were able to look at a number of other factors in terms of education at arrival, and we did find, there was a gradient in terms of positivity with education. So those that were less educated at arrival were more likely to test positive. And we were also able to look at knowledge of official languages. So if you knew neither official language, you were also more likely to test positive. So those are some of the major findings that we found in our report.
Did that surprise anybody who was working on this report at all?
I don't think so. I think we had started working on the report, early in the pandemic when there were some other, anecdotes coming out about refugees in Quebec and, certain immigrant groups in Ontario that were likely being affected. So I think we had clues, but to see it come out in the data in the way that it did, I don't know if we, for some groups we didn't realize how big of an impact it had made. So,
are you able to break down what you found within Windsor, Essex, as it relates to the statistics and the numbers of people who did test positive?
For immigrants and refugees, we found that around 3% were tested for COVID, but the positivity was around 8.5%. So when you have a differential like that, where positivity is higher than testing, that suggests that there's barriers to testing in that area. So we see that for immigrants and refugees in the Windsor-Essex area, whereas we don't see that for the group that we refer to as Canadian-born long-term residents, whereas about 5% were tested and the positivity was 3%. So the barrier to testing doesn't appear to be there. And then also we looked at what we refer to as newcomers. And this is a group of people that were new to Ontario, and they were new registrants to OHIP. So for the newcomer group for Windsor Essex, this is where the findings are a little bit more striking, was that testing rates were about 3.6%, but positivity was around 27%. So a very large discrepancy there. And that suggests that there are barriers to testing for that newcomer group.
There were 149 new cases of COVID-19 in Ontario today, and it's down slightly from yesterday, but over the past few weeks, the new daily cases have been rising. It's a problem that other provinces are facing too. Farah Morelli reports that BC's closed nightclubs and banquet halls, but so far, officials here aren't talking about imposing similar restrictions.
The party's over in BC. In an effort to curb the spread of COVID-19, it's rolling back some reopening measures.
Effective today, all nightclubs and all standalone banquet halls are ordered closed.
Today, questions about whether Ontario should do the same. Over the past week, the number of new COVID-19 cases in this province has been rising, from 133 a week ago, peaking at 190 on Monday. That's the highest number of cases on any single day since late July, and in recent days, a slight decrease.
When it comes to following BC's lead with nightclubs and banquet halls, do you think we here in Ontario should be following that lead?
Yes, I do.
Infection control epidemiologist Colin Furness says when Ontario has followed BC's lead, it's done well. He believes simply pausing further reopenings isn't enough.
I think we should have announced plans to pause many weeks ago. This is very predictable what's happening, and I think it's a lot of experts have been saying this is inevitable. We need to take steps proactively.
Today, Premier Doug Ford said there are no plans to follow BC's rollback.
We'll take the advice off Dr. Williams and our health team, and they'll decide when we're going to be rolling things back, or if we are. We aren't there. I don't think we're even close to being there yet.
Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health said he believes the uptick is related to private parties and large gatherings, and less so at businesses.
It's extremely important to know who's getting infected and where they're getting infected, so we can actually make focused public health responses.
This expert believes blanket closures might force people to gather unsafely elsewhere.
So it's one thing to close that down, but if you just halt one problem, you may create another. So the focused and targeted public health messaging is crucial. Like, that is a crucial component to this, to really inform people of what their risks are, how they can get together in a safe manner.
A quick look outside here. The humidity today really kind of hit us, and it might have been unexpected if you weren't paying attention to what Colette Kennedy was talking about yesterday. How long does all of this continue? Well, hopefully she has answers after the break. And joining us now for a live look at the weather is Colette Kennedy. Colette, it feels like a day where you want to eat the bowl of soup, but the humidex is making it so you don't want to have the warmth in you. It's kind of funky today.
You want the fireplace on, but then you overheat. Yes, I understand. You know, I feel like I do want to show you this. I mean, there was some sunshine. It just wasn't quite here in Windsor. Somebody got to those mid-20s. Yes, a little off for you today. You can see where the heat was. It was close, but it just wasn't here. So 20 degrees, the best we could do. Look at some of these numbers. I mean, just to the south of us, you know, Cleveland up to 23, Erie at 24, Buffalo 25, and Syracuse 30 degrees with humidex values in the upper 30s. But unfortunately, I take responsibility. We did not get out of the clouds. There are 20 degrees in Windsor and Detroit, same thing at 20 degrees. And a closer look, Chatham-Kent 22, slightly better there, but that cloud deck just a little bit too thick in terms of what we've been seeing, and those winds still coming in from kind of the northeast there. You're seeing that in Chatham-Kent as well as here into Windsor. Heavy rains, and what we're seeing with the jet stream, and that's what's just continuing to pull all the systems that we're seeing and all that rainflow. It goes, the heavier stuff keeps going on towards the north. Some patchy fog, though, and some mist certainly possible again overnight tonight, and even towards the wee morning hours as we get towards 5, 6 a.m. Yes, there is a chance we could get into a few light showers. So as we go into the early morning hours tomorrow, we could see a few of these stray showers kind of coming our way as we go back in for a closer look there and making their way through our communities. But primarily, again, the heavier stuff, talking 10, 20, 30 millimeters, that stays to the north of us. And look at this. Finally, we're going to see that jet stream going towards more of a zonal flow, so kind of straightening out a little bit. And as we see that storm track leaving us, we are going to see high pressure moving in, and we are going to see our skies clearing. And so we will likely see some sunny breaks coming up as we get into tomorrow afternoon and getting into more of a mix of sun and cloud, but getting into more of a full sunshine, seriously, folks, as we get into Friday. So some glimmers of hope tomorrow afternoon, but really into Friday. Patchy fog, though, tomorrow morning. Your temperatures then looking like this, depending how much sun we can get into tomorrow afternoon. Friday, though, looking much better for us as we get that high pressure coming in, and then the temperatures coming back up, Chris, as we go into the weekend. But another system is going to come in and bring some scattered showers and thunderstorms. You don't want soup this weekend. No fire, no soup.
Not during that. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Coming up next, a new book puts the president in the spotlight as it relates to what he knew about COVID-19 at the start of the outbreak. Veteran American journalist Bob Woodward is releasing a follow-up to his highly critical 2018 book on the presidency of Donald Trump. The new book reveals that the U.S. president knew far more about COVID-19 than he let on publicly in the early days of the outbreak. CBC's Katie Simpson with the details.
At the start of the year, very little was publicly known about COVID-19 in terms of how it spread, how serious it could be, and its potential to upend daily life around the world. Though it now appears the White House had a pretty good idea from the start, information that was not shared with the public. Bob Woodward's new book reveals the president was told in late January by his top advisors that the coronavirus would be the most serious national security threat of his presidency, and that it had the potential to inflict the same kind of damage as the 1918 pandemic, which killed 50 million people. In one of more than a dozen interviews with the veteran journalist, Donald Trump shares stunning details about what he knew then.
You just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus.
These candid comments don't match Trump's public tone at the time. He repeatedly claimed the situation was under control and that the virus would miraculously disappear. It was all part of his plan, he later told Woodward.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes, sir.
Because I don't want to create a panic.
The Trump administration has been accused of squandering the early days of the outbreak, putting lives in danger by not encouraging physical distancing earlier and by bungling the rollout of widespread testing systems. Trump and his team are standing by their handling of COVID-19.
This was a horrible thing. It was sent to us by China. Should not have happened, should never have happened. We don't want to have to show panic. We're not going to show panic. And that's exactly what I did. And I was very open, whether it's to Woodward or anybody else. It's just another political hit job.
More than 6 million Americans have been diagnosed with the virus. Around 190,000 have died. Numbers that did not need to be so high, according to Trump's critics, including Democratic presidential challenger Joe Biden.
He knew how dangerous it was. And while this deadly disease ripped through our nation, he failed to do his job on purpose.
He says Trump's failure to lead has cost lives. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
It is 6:29 p.m. and that's it for us here at CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, you can go to our website anytime, cbc.ca/Windsor. We're on social media too. You can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Power and Politics is up next. We're going to join that already in progress. Thanks for watching. Make sure you and your family have a great night tonight.